You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, along with once appearing in a one-man show about levitation called Wuthering Heights, is a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Yes, Jeff. Wuthering Heights was a great time in my life. I just did it by myself. It was about levitation. It was fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah, it was great.
It was the inspiration for Dua Lipa's song Levitating, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't really talk about my relationship with Dua. We go way back.
We want you to start your week off right with our podcast, and we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest, spiciest clips and full episodes on YouTube. Josh, today we are going to talk about Wuthering Heights. We've done quite a few book adaptations recently. I don't know that we've done it on purpose, but this is yet another one. I love movies of this era. Pride and Prejudice is one of my all-time favorites. We should absolutely cover that at some point, but today it's Wuthering Heights. This is an Emerald Fennell adaptation who did Saltburn, which you and I both, I think, eventually loved. I don't know that we loved it at first, but we grew to appreciate it. And
yeah,
it reimagines...
I would say appreciate. I don't know that I loved Saltburn. I would say I appreciated it.
Sure. Okay, so her version of Wuthering Heights reimagines the turbulent, obsessive love between Heathcliff and Catherine as a dark, atmospheric tale of passion, revenge, and emotional destruction set against the haunting Yorkshire moors. Josh, tell us some of the topics we're going to talk about today with Heathcliff and Catherine.
Jeff, the big one that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about personality disorders. And I'm going to give you a very good layperson's definition of what that is, why they're so important, and why these conditions tormented Heathcliff and Catherine so much, and how their personality disorders entwined with each other to create a really toxic relationship. We can agree that was a toxic relationship, correct?
What are you talking about? Who had the toxic relationship?
Heathcliff and Catherine.
You mean Catherine and the guy that she marries, right? The simp?
Oh, Edgar? Whose name you can't even remember?
I can't even remember his name because he's just such a nice guy. Basically an incel, loser.
Yeah,
yes,
right.
I can agree. Heathcliff and Catherine are.
That's the problem with these toxic relationships is they turn everything on its head, as do the personality disorders at play in the psychological makeup of the people who really do suffer from them.
Yeah.
So that's mainly what we're going to talk about. We'll touch on codependency and how their relationship was one of a type of relationship that could be called codependent. And then we're also really going to talk just about the culture of trauma and abuse that was going on throughout the time and throughout Catherine's family of origin.
Sure, which I don't think is not applicable to today. I think that Wuthering Heights is a story that still rings true in modern toxic relationships in terms of its obsessiveness, et cetera, et cetera. From the filmmaking side, Josh, I'm going to talk about, because I thought this was really interesting, there was some controversy over the casting of Jacob Elordi, so we're going to talk about broader context of casting and casting issues. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about exploratory art and why I'm not a huge fan. This was reimagined as an exploration of psychology, and I don't know that film is a place where we can explore, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Wuthering Heights follows codependents, Heathcliff and Catherine, as they navigate being way too sexy to be happy. Catherine marries the pure villain next door, the nice guy who will treat her well. Oh, what a jerk. Who's keeping her from getting her fuck on with total piece of shit Heathcliff, who comes home with a clean face and tons of money for some unknown reason. As their shittiness towards each other and everyone around them increases, Catherine learns that the one decent person in her life, Nellie, betrayed her and tries to fire her. After Catherine comes to her senses, but not really, she cuts things off with Heathcliff, forcing him to revenge bang Catherine's sister-in-law. And the movie ends with Catherine dying of sepsis and Heathcliff feeling bad about it? Question mark.
Yeah. Wow, Jeff, that is a fabulous synopsis of this movie.
It's not inaccurate.
It's not inaccurate at all. It's a synopsis of the book, too. Look, this is about weirdly unrequited love. It's about incredibly dysfunctional personalities. And I do have to say, I think the impact of both what the book is trying to say and also what I think the filmmaker was trying to say with making it so explicitly sexual, I think it was muted a little bit by casting two such incredibly hot people as Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi. I watched the whole movie, but I tried watching it with my wife, and she made it through about a quarter of it before she said, these people are way too hot for me to care about why they don't really want to be with each other.
That's so interesting. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I don't disagree. It's funny. So a holiday movie that my wife and I watch every year that we love is called The Holiday. And my favorite story is the Jack Black, Kate Winslet romance. And part of the reason is because they're not as hot as Jude Law and Cameron Diaz. And so it's just a lot sweeter that they're finding each other in this really interesting way. Whereas Jude Law, and it's like she shows up at his house, he's single, she's single. Of course they're going to get their bang on. They're just too hot not to. And that's just not that interesting to me from a story standpoint. I felt the same way here. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk about toxic relationships, Josh. I think that's the big one to get into today. Like you said earlier, this is obviously a toxic relationship, correct?
Hold on, let me check. Yes. Yes. And funnily enough, one of the things that I kept thinking throughout this movie was, wow, Jacob Elordi and Margot Robbie don't have great chemistry on screen together.
Oh, interesting.
And I was thinking maybe they just don't have great chemistry together. Some actors just don't. And then I started to think that maybe this was actually really good direction
and acting
of them. And act. Look, Margot Robbie, Jacob Elordi, yes, they are incredibly attractive human beings. They're also fabulous actors. Both. I haven't disliked anything that they've been in. They bring it. They do the work. They're incredible. So, but they didn't have good chemistry on screen to me. And I think that was the good direction and the acting about the toxicity of this relationship.
Agreed. Because it wasn't about chemistry. He was her pet. And so they weren't going to have chemistry the same way that lovers would necessarily have chemistry. They didn't see each other in a romantic way, from my point of view. And that's from reading the book, from watching the movie. This wasn't a traditional relationship. This was a very fucked up relationship. And so Catherine was an incredibly selfish person who really saw him as her pet. And she's going to get mad at him when he doesn't do exactly what she wants. And that's not a relationship where you would see the type of healthy sort of chemistry as you would in anything else. But I thought she nailed that. She did such a good job of kind of towing that line. So I agree with you. It didn't look like great chemistry, but it was fantastic acting.
Yeah, Jeff, I read the book Wuthering Heights in high school. I think that's what many of us do, or at least we read the cliff notes of it, or at least we read someone else's term paper.
The Heathcliff notes.
That's actually good.
Yeah, I should have done that as our sponsor of the week.
Oh, you should have.
Cliff notes written by Heathcliff.
But anyways, I certainly didn't come away with the lesson from the book about how exactly toxic their relationship was. And maybe I just don't remember it, maybe, or whatever. But I think it's a really key point, a teaching point that's missing if people aren't really harping on that, going, hey, we get it. There's this unrequited romance. You want something that you can't have for reasons of class that are well laid out in the book that aren't delved into as much in the movie. But I don't think that is hit upon about how horrendous this relationship is. And in fact, I think in some perverse regards, it gets held up as, oh, this is what you want to strive to be. You want to strive to have this amount of longing. And spoiler alert, no, you fucking don't.
No, you don't. No, this is billed as a romance, and it is absolutely. That's the thing. Art is in the beholder, so I don't see this as romantic. I remember when I read the book, which I read the book later in life. I read it recently as part of the monthly choice of the Reading Rain Bros, my all male book club. And I just was like, what the fuck? These people are terrible. There's nothing about this that reads romantic to me. But I also understand why people would get caught up in this as this great romance. These main characters who can't be together for whatever reason and feel really terrible about it and then do terrible things. No, these are just terrible people. This is not a romance.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I am channeling all of our listeners who, like me, are going... I'm sorry, the Reading Rainbows? Please tell me you have shirts.
Oh, I wish. We should get shirts made. No, the Reading Bro, we disbanded for a little while, but we keep talking about getting back to it.
That is awesome. Okay, so Jeff, you're right. We call Wuthering Heights a romance, and I understand why, but I don't view it as a romance. From my standpoint, it is a forensic case study in untreated personality disorder pathology.
Okay.
Think of a personality disorder as a mental habit or way of seeing the world that is so rigid and extreme that it keeps causing a person to crash into the same life problems and relationship walls over and over again.
So for the listeners who that feels like the layman's definition of insanity. Crashing into the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. How does that differ?
It differs. It's a really good point. The way it differs is that term insanity is so stigma-laden that we really don't use it.
Sure.
But in some ways, it's a nonsensical idea that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same result. So that we don't use the term insanity. People who have personality disorders aren't insane from our definition of the word, but they do have very pathological and repetitive, rigid and extreme behavior and thought patterns that end up causing for them the same problems over and over again.
Okay, so there's some similarities, at least for what because I hate that definition. People use it all the time. So, you know what the definition of insanity is? And yeah, it's not really the definition of insanity, but it sounds similar to what we're talking about. Let's keep going. What?
Oh, you know me, I'm a forensic psychiatrist and also a jackass, so when people say, you know what the definition of insanity is, I will give them then the actual definition of insanity, and they look at me like I have a dick on my forehead, and I go, you wanted the definition of insanity?
That's fantastic.
Okay, but Jeff, back...
correct when you're dealing with the forensic psychiatrist,
you gonna step to me, bro? All right, so Jeff, let's start with Catherine, okay?
Okay.
She's the classic archetype of a type of personality disorder that I don't think we've talked about on the show before. Okay. She has histrionic personality disorder with strong borderline personality features. Okay. So Catherine doesn't just want to be loved. She needs to be the sun around which every planet in her orbit crashes. Her identity is completely diffused. That is, she lacks a basic sense of who she is. When she says, I am Heathcliff, she isn't actually being poetic. She's describing a profound lack of ego boundaries. To Catherine, people are just a mere extension of her own emotional needs. So when she marries Edgar Linton for status while demanding Heathcliff remain her soulmate, she's engaging in splitting on a grand Victorian scale. That is, she wants the stability of the good object in Edgar and the raw, primitive validation of the shared trauma object in Heathcliff.
So it sounds like histrionic personality disorder is a term that guys can use instead of, sweetie, you're being hysterical. Is that probably good advice for relationships?
No, it's really not, for two reasons. The first reason is, come on, man, don't be a dick. Have some self-preservation sense here.
Sure.
And the second reason is histrionic doesn't have anything to do with the term hysterical.
Okay, then
So,
define histrionic for me.
first, let me just dispense with hysterical for a second. So hysterical was a very old term, hyster actually meaning the uterus. That's where the stem comes from. And so it was basically saying, oh, you're being a woman and just dismissing it. And they actually used to do hysterectomies.
Sure.
That is taking out the uterus, thinking that would somehow cause a woman to be less hysterical. That's a whole bunch of garbage, a whole bunch of crap that we don't have time to get into today. We can in the future. But histrionic is different. Histrionic is incredibly flamboyant, incredibly emotionally labile, pretty much how we just described Catherine. She doesn't have a stable sense of herself on which to rest, so she broadcasts and lashes out with all these great grand emotions, trying to play off others' reactions to provide some sense of stability.
Yeah, and it's funny, because they mentioned that a few times in the film, and it almost gets kind of glossed over, but it was really well said, where they talk about her, even from a young age, like manipulating everybody with tears, crying all the time. The dad is just like, my God, you with the tears. And even later, they miss her miscarriage because they just think that she's just being herself again, which is overly, I guess, histrionic.
Yeah. Two thoughts about that. One, first, the father was grossly abusive and contributed to a tremendous amount of her trauma. I think they even alluded to the fact that he probably sexually assaulted her. But second, I think Nellie, the Nellie character, really summed it up well in an exchange between Catherine and Nellie when Catherine says, "You love seeing me cry." Nellie reflects back to her, "Not half as much as you love crying."
Exactly. And God, the Nellie character in this, which is true to the book in some regards, because the book is told through Nellie's point of view. But Nellie really is the most humane and honest person in my mind in both the book and the movie. Played expertly by, I cannot remember her name.
By Hong Chow.
Hong Chow.
Yeah, it's Hong Chow, yeah.
Yeah, Hong Chow, who, like, if you haven't seen The Menu, go watch it. She was incredible in that. She was actually incredible in Downsizing, movie with Matt Damon back in the day. She's awesome. She's just always a win for me. Anytime I see her in a movie, she's amazing.
My favorite role from her was in actually the miniseries of The Watchmen, in which she played the trillionaire tech magnate.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. That entire miniseries, by the way, was phenomenal.
That was good. That was good.
She was in that, and she was just great.
Okay, Catherine, histrionic, personality disorder. Let's get into Heathcliff.
Oh, God. So Heathcliff's a little bit more classic for what we've talked about on the podcast before. If Catherine's the fire, then Heathcliff is the oxygen-deprived vacuum that sucks the life out of everyone. He is he is a textbook case of antisocial personality disorder, born from childhood reactive attachment. That is a form of trauma in which the stable parent rocks don't exist. He lacks empathy. Not because he's moody or sexy, but because his moral compass was shattered by abuse and betrayal. His entire adult life is a long game of calculated, predatory revenge. And he doesn't just want Catherine. He wants to own the dirt she walks on and ruin the lineage of anyone who's ever looked at her.
Is it a little bit understandable given his past? What else should we want from Heathcliff? He was abandoned and abused.
Yeah, we should want more because there are more people who've had that kind of background end up not developing antisocial personality disorder than do.
See, and that's such an important part to mention and to keep reiterating, Josh, because so many people are willing to write off somebody's bad behavior because of their past. And it's, no, it's still a choice. The bad behavior later in life is still a choice. And there are plenty of people who had bad things happen and don't act like this. I think about this a lot with people who end up in therapy and they realize why they're the way they are. And it's like it's some sort of trauma from childhood. as soon as you realize where it came from and you don't take immediate steps to fix it, I no longer have any sort of empathy for you continuing to do that crappy behavior. If you know that it's crappy and you continue to do it, that is now very much on you.
That is exactly right, Jeff. And that is one of the things that is so tragic about this tale, right? Is they get locked into this toxic cycle because of their personalities, but also because of the choices they make and they don't. So now, why are they so toxic together?
Yeah.
In clinical terms, we call them a high conflict couple. So they are locked in a pathologically enmeshed cycle. They trigger each other's deepest core shames. Catherine's fear of abandonment is triggered by Heathcliff's disappearances, and Heathcliff's sense of worthlessness is triggered by Catherine's social climbing. They don't have chemistry. They have trauma bonding.
Interesting. So describe a little bit more about trauma bonding, and correct me if I'm wrong here. Trauma bonding can actually be incredibly positive as well, right?
It can be supportive. We do worry in trauma bonding that the bond is really related to the trauma, and if the trauma is resolved, then that whole thing may fall apart. We do talk about that as a pink flag when we talk to people who are in therapy about, hey, are you really attracted to this person? Are you really supportive? Or were they a mechanism to get out of a situation? Explore that. Maybe you did find your soulmate during a significant trauma, but the odds of that are pretty low. So let's talk about that.
So you're saying that Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves should not have ended up together after Speed?
They didn't. She ditched him pretty quickly for Jason Patrick.
No, I know. I'm saying in your mind that was a good decision by Sandra Bullock to end that relationship.
I'm not going to go that far. It's a good question, but I see where you're going.
I'm not going anywhere. That's the end of that.
It's something to consider. Whoa.
That's where I was going with that.
Okay, so back to Heathcliff and Catherine. In this high conflict relationship that they have, they exist in a state of alternating idealization and devaluation.
Okay.
1 minute they are one soul, and the next minute they're literally trying to haunt each other to death. When two people with these traits collide, they create almost a madness shared by two people.
Sure.
They reinforce the other's worst misperceptions of the world, and they believe that their pain is proof of their greatness, when in reality, it's just proof of their dysfunction.
Right, which I think is just so true of early relationships. I just remember relationships in high school where, it was like, if we're not brooding over each other and want to be next to each other every second, then this isn't true love. And I just wonder where that nonsense comes from. And it obviously comes from things like Wuthering Heights. But you have to be so brooding and so sad to prove your love. It's even like the Romeo and Juliets, where in the end they're just so sad and desperate that they end up murdering themselves.
Well, Jeff, it is a theme that appears to be universal and does span time. As you pointed out, Romeo and Juliet really captures the imagination of the people who read it, and back in the day of usually the young women who read it, because it spoke to that kind of angst, to that kind of brooding angst. Wuthering Heights did the same thing. Even in our generation, the Twilight books did the exact same thing. And
do you think Twilight was based on Wuthering Heights?
I actually looked this up, and Stephanie Meyer was very specific that the third book of the Twilight series was specifically meant to do an homage to Wuthering Heights.
Oh, cool.
But the whole theme is universal and timeless. In fact, I have actually prescribed reading the Twilight books to some fathers treated who were trying to understand their teenage daughter's lovesick angst with folks. And they say it really helped. They're like, oh my God, what Bella's going through. These are the kind of, in their minds, ridiculous things that my daughter says and feels. But there's this idea of forbidden love or unreachable love is omnipresent. And I think it's probably a developmental stage that we go through.
Sure, I believe
to
that.
try to figure out what we want, what is healthy.
Yeah.
Why would we know what a healthy relationship is right off the bat?
No, unless one is modeled for you. I think that I could be wrong about this. I hope I'm not, because I want to model a good relationship for my kids, and then I want my relationships to want a good healthy relationship. But it could be that just kids are wired, and so the storm of the chemicals within a teenager's body might just be so great, no matter what history you've shown them, that they seek some sort of lighthouse, some sort of port in the storm. And that's where these brooding love stories come from, is just feeling so chaotic at that age. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty normal to feel so chaotic at that specific age. If you're still feeling that chaotic in your 30s, though, get your shit together, man. And that was not a very empathetic way to say that. If anything, I mean that a little bit as a joke, because if you don't have your shit together, that's okay. And if we're working at getting our shit together, that's the goal. But I don't have any empathy for Heathcliff and Catherine, is where I really was aiming at that.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit before we move on about getting your shit together around this. If you have a personality disorder, or you find that you are doing the same things over and over again, that self-sabotaging your own happiness, first of all, good for you. You've got some insight into what's going on for you, and that insight is the first step in changing what you're doing. A lot of people with some types of personality disorders don't ever end up getting that insight. And certainly Heathcliff and Catherine never developed that kind of insight at all, that, hey, I'm the problem, it's me, to quote St. Taylor.
I actually think Heathcliff does. I think Heathcliff
You think
absolutely knows. Yeah, because that's why he goes and tortures Isabella.
That's really conflictual, because the going and torturing Isabella is, as you're saying, he knows it and he embraces the bad behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have any qualms.
Sure. He shows a complete and total lack of empathy. What I'm saying is that I have encountered the occasional person with antisocial personality disorder who said, hey, I figured I'm doing this stuff and I can't feel empathy, or I don't feel the empathy all the way. It's getting in my way of achieving what I want. How do I fix that? That's the rare antisocial personality disorder affected person who does that, but it does happen. What is really important to know is that for a lot of the personality disorders, especially histrionic or borderline personality disorder, or even narcissistic personality disorder, if you have the insight to understand that you need help, help is available. Especially for borderline personality disorder, this extreme valuation and devaluation of people, the black and white thinking that people go through. There's a very well-studied good treatment, such as dialectic behavioral therapy, that helps people manage these thought patterns and really break them. So it is not hopeless, and help is available.
Okay, let's shift focus a little bit, Josh, because I want to talk about collateral damage. And this is the reason why I don't like Catherine and Heathcliff. I don't have a problem if there's two lovers that are like stuck in a situation, they don't feel they can get out, and they're brooding about it, and they're making poor choices. All of that I can empathize with. But the reason why I have such a vitriolic disdain for Catherine and Heathcliff is because of how shitty they are to good people. If you want to be brooding and miserable, go for it. But the minute that you start affecting another person, affecting any person, then it's no longer cute. And the Nellie character in the movie is such an interesting character because she's working so hard behind the scenes for what she thinks is the best thing for Catherine, but also for herself. And this is where, when we're watching Catherine be so cruel to Nellie, there's a piece of us that's watching that's, oh yeah, she was a servant and Catherine was a lady, and therefore that's okay because that's how people were treated in olden times. Wasn't okay then, and it's not okay now. Nellie is a human being, and I don't care if she's a servant. She has just as much value as you do. So I very quickly am like, I don't care, Catherine, like how brooding you are. When you try and fire Nellie, That's not cool. When you're just being cruel to Nellie, you're using Nellie as an emotional crutch. All of that is where I tune out. Nellie, when she tries to fire Nellie and then she's, what will I do? And Catherine's, I don't care. I'm out. I'm out on Catherine. I can't care about her anymore. And this is not a love story for me anymore. And anybody that thinks that this is still a romance, that's pretty terrible. That's pretty terrible.
The collateral damage for the emotional well-being of the people around folks with personality disorders who are in a toxic relationship is inestimable. It's really high. People get shit on constantly, and that's what happened here. And in the real world and nowadays, when this is happening, what I advise those people who come to me, and they've identified people who really aren't going to change and have no empathy for them, I just advise them, hey, make the calculation. Is this person worth keeping in your life or not? Because might they change? Sure, but you're being destroyed by them. Yeah. And you have to make that calculation. You're right. Catherine and Heathcliff, if you really think about it, they did not view the people around them as anything but objects.
Objects and obstacles.
And that is really the only thing that they did. And the really insidious dynamic that I have seen happen over and over again in folks without personality disorders trying to deal with loved ones or people in their life with personality disorders is that there's a perverse reversal of the dynamic in some sense, in which people will often be accused by somebody with a personality disorder of trying to subvert them or trying to be mean to them or whatever. And it happens over and over again. And you saw that from Catherine. She accused Nellie of, oh, you want to see me fail, you want to hurt me, blah, 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 blah. And she didn't, over and over and over again. But because of that abuse, in a couple instances, Nellie was put in the position where she did end up doing what Catherine was accusing her of because of that perverse dynamic. Yeah. One of those instances was when Heathcliff overheard their conversation and she didn't say anything and Heathcliff left. And she ended up doing exactly the thing that she hadn't been doing, but that Catherine had been accusing her of doing. That dynamic happens over and over again in real life.
Yeah, and if you're saying to yourself,
personality disorders,
and if you're saying to yourself, Nellie shouldn't have done that. No, Nellie's entitled to self-preservation as much as everybody else is. And when your bosses and when your livelihood is so dramatic and tumultuous, I understand people taking matters into their own hands because you've got to think about feeding yourself. So this collateral damage where everybody should act correctly, even if somebody is acting in this tumultuous way, I disagree with that. I do think that there's a certain matter of self-preservation that's forgivable for certain quote-unquote bad behavior. I understand Nellie not telling Heathcliff. I understand Nellie burning those notes. She's trying to protect Catherine, but ultimately she's trying to protect herself. She's trying to protect herself from getting fired, trying to protect her job, and treat Nellie better and she'll treat you better in kind. And I'm not saying there's an eye for an eye there. I just understand the incredibly difficult position that Nellie is put in.
That's right. Nellie understood that there was never a happy ending for Heathcliff and Catherine. Even you take the class.
Actually, Josh, I'm gonna immediately fire back on that. Nellie believed that the happy ending for Catherine was being with her husband.
That's what I mean. Nellie identified that there was never a happy ending for Catherine and Heathcliff.
And Heathcliff, gotcha.
She knew that from the beginning. Because of their personalities, even if they had gotten together and said, oh, I'm with you, let's run off and make a life together, they weren't going to be able to do it. It wasn't going to happen. It was always going to be chaotic. They can't be comfortable in a situation in which there isn't chaos.
Yeah, and you could certainly argue that it is Catherine's choice if she wants to, quote-unquote, be poor, run off with Heathcliff and be poor. And Nellie makes the decision for Catherine. No, you're not going to do that. You're going to go marry this guy because I need to keep my job. But you could look at that as being shitty because Catherine's entitled to run off. But Nellie didn't know that Heathcliff was going to run off in the middle of the night. And I want to talk about that for a second, Josh, because we think about this being such an amazing love story. And people who do think this is such an amazing love story, I want to remind you that they didn't love each other enough to just walk away and be with each other. They didn't love each other enough to walk away from their comforts.
That's right.
So it was like, oh, I really want to be with you, but I don't really want to be poor. And it's, if you really love each other, just elope. Just run away, start again, live in a shack and make your sweet love. But no, I want my creature comforts. I still want to have a servant. No, I'm not willing to pay that price. That's okay. Then what is your love really worth? It's, oh, no, but I feel so terrible that I have to do this in secret. No, you don't have to do this in secret. That's not actually a choice you have to make. And you could make a version of this where it truly is somebody is in some sort of indentured servitude and they're just not able to live a life and make these choices that they want and fall in love and do everything they can to break away and be with each other. You can make that story. But this was not that. This is two very selfish people. Two very selfish tornadoes constantly running into each other and destroying the towns around them.
Correct. Yep. Correct.
Yeah.
Coming soon, Twisters 3.
Yeah. I just Twister and then Twisters. And so I'm just wondering if the third one is going to be Twisters. We're just going to... Twisters. Also watch the parody ad for Titty Twisters available on the Large and in Charge channel. All right. Josh, I did think it was interesting because this is, again, an adaptation. And this book was highly adapted from the original source material. And in a way, I'm kind of glad that she did adapt it because I think that movies work the best when you're just telling a simple story and the book is very complicated in a fun way. But the entire second half of the book is removed. But I just want to talk for a second about some of the differences and why I think that ultimately this wasn't well adapted. I thought it was a super interesting choice to make it that Isabella was not terrorized the way that she was in the book. She essentially enters a BDSM relationship that she's 100% happy to enter into. And I did not understand that as a choice. That didn't add anything to the story. It didn't make Isabella interesting. It sort of gives Heathcliff a little bit of what he wants. He seems pretty happy in that relationship. There are times where he's write another letter and she's, and then I can blah, blah. And then they start making out and stuff. And it's okay. They don't seem that miserable. It kind of does seem like they're perfect for each other in a way. That was a really weird choice to me. And then the other big change, besides gutting half the book, was Kathy dying of sepsis rather than in childbirth, dying after losing the baby. And again, I'm like, I don't know what that added to the story. And one, I want you to talk about some of those things. But two, in terms of an adaptation, we oftentimes adapt things to tell a complete and simple story. I couldn't even tell you what the story was in this movie. There isn't a clear want and change. They obviously want to be together, so that's a little bit of a clear want, but they don't really go about doing anything to be together other than just banging. They don't have a plan to get away from their circumstance. And in the end, she makes the decision to cut it off with Heathcliff, but then not really because she's so sad about him marrying Isabella. And this was adapted and cut down, but it still failed to tell a story. And I just thought that was a little bit beneath Emerald in terms of a director. I think that she's better than that. So I think that we could have had a better adaptation if there had been a very clear point of view about the nature of these lovers and what it means to be in such a toxic relationship that it ruins everyone around you.
Yeah, really good points. So with Kathy dying of sepsis rather than childbirth, I actually really liked that choice to solidify, from my point of view, obviously, to solidify how disordered Kathy's personality was. Remember, I made that point a few minutes ago about how Kathy's behavior forced Nellie to do some things that she wouldn't do, but that Kathy had always accused her of trying to undercut her, which she was doing. But then her behavior forced her to do that. This was another example, the most deadly example, where she just didn't believe her, that she'd lost the child. She bled, but it was dead inside her, and she was dying of that. Oh my God. When she realized, I missed it because I just didn't believe her, because she forced her into a position that Kathy had accused her of her entire life, of trying to undercut her, trying to be against her, and forced her into that position where she was, because of Kathy's behavior.
Yeah,
so I liked that.
Force is an interesting word because Kathy didn't force them; they all make the choice.
They make the choice, but
it's a little bit of the boy who cried wolf, and every character in there cries or ignores the cry at some point. Her father ignores it and is like, "Tell me when you're out of this mood." Even the husband later is like, "I'm not going to deal with these histrionics. Tell me when you're out of this. We all know that you do this, and there's no point in talking to you while you're in these stages." So it happened with both of them, and it happened with Nellie, where, yes, people are making a choice to discard her feelings, but it's a little bit of the boy who cried wolf. It's a lot of the boy who cried wolf, where we understand Nellie not paying attention to Catherine's, not hystericalness, but histrionics.
Yeah. The choice about Isabella, I didn't get that either. That was a little weird. They didn't set that character up perfectly to be able to go into that kind of relationship with Heathcliff, other than the fact of the Gothic trope of the sexually repressed young woman who then he's able to dominate her. I thought they skipped over that. They skipped over building that into her character. Was it lazy, or was it just playing on everybody's assumptions that a Gothic young woman like that would behave that way? I don't know, but I agree with that. I don't know what it brought, other than
it honestly felt like a cheap
way, her being able to be manipulated by Heathcliff quicker.
Yeah, it felt like just a cheap way of pushing in some alternative sexual lifestyle. Yeah, that's all it felt like. Yeah, and just her wink at the end of "I am where I want to be."
Yeah, weird.
It was just weird. It was not, the choice did not work for me, and it was also, it's like it takes away a lot of the tragedy. You know, I mean, in the book, it's incredibly tragic, and the sister ends up running away and detailing the abuse, and in a way, it kind of lets Heathcliff off the hook a little bit, because this relationship is more consensual. And I was like, I didn't want these people let off the hook. These people didn't deserve to be let off the hook. So I don't know. That was a weird decision. The sepsis thing, I think, Josh, was aimed at not having the lineage continue, because they don't. A big part of the second half of the book is Heathcliff's revenge against Catherine's kid. And so Catherine not having it, then we can kind of end the story there. But which, I'm fine with. I don't have an issue just focusing on these two. If you're a Wuthering Heights fan, you might be furious about that. But again, we need to tell a simple story when it comes to film. We don't have the time to get into everybody's inner thoughts the way that you do in a book. They're just different types of art.
So I assume that the Reading Rainbows were all up in arms about the second half of the book being cut out.
I gotta see if Shane watched the movie, but I think he'd be pretty upset about it. He's a showrunner. He's gonna have some notes.
Okay, all right. Anyway. Thanks for just carrying with that.
Yeah.
Look, I do think that the actress who played Isabella, Alison Oliver, is fantastic. This wasn't a great role, I thought, with what they did with it, but she was so great in the miniseries Task. I thought she was fantastic. So
who was she in Task?
She was the state patrol officer who ended up getting shot and killed.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I get her confused with Jessie Buckley.
Okay.
To me, those two look a lot alike, and I think they have a similar accent. But yeah, so I even had to look it up. I was like, "Is that Jessie Buckley?" I was like, "Oh no, okay, that's not Jessie Buckley." I was like, "It looks a little younger than Jessie," but anyway.
Jessie Buckley, not Jesse Plemons. I was having a really hard time with that one for a second. Yep, that one's on me. One's on me.
Yeah. All right, Josh, let's talk about the casting of Jacob Elordi in this, because this is a really interesting conversation that goes on all the time in Hollywood.
Okay.
So in the book, Heathcliff is described as dark hair, dark face. And it's everyone's understanding that And it's the consensus among scholars and Brontos. We'll call people who love Bronte's books as Brontos. It's the consensus that he's a person of color, that Heathcliff is a person of color. And so there was some backlash about casting Jacob Elordi. And I am definitely one of those people that think if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. And so if we're going to whine and cry about The Little Mermaid being cast as black or Snow White being cast as a person of color, we need to massively take issue when there's a role for a person of color and it's not cast appropriately. So I agree that casting Jacob Elordi in this case was inappropriate. There's plenty of really interesting and really talented men of color who could have played Heathcliff. Jacob Elordi crushed it, and it's nothing necessarily against him, but I do think that they made a mistake casting Jacob Elordi in this this is a role that this is a really great role that could have gone to a person of color. And if we're going to take issue with people of color being cast in traditionally white roles, then we should have issue with a white guy being cast in a role for a person of color.
Yeah, Jeff, what that reminds me of is it reminds me of the hullabaloo recently around the Harry Potter series reboot and the casting of a black actor in the Severus Snape character, which I actually do not have a problem with whatsoever.
No.
And I think the number one reason I don't have a problem with it is there's just so much whiteness in Hollywood, and I don't really have a problem with creative choices made that way. But I think traditionally and historically, the representation for actors of non-white skin has been so low that when there is a role that is written into literature, then that should be honored. That's my perspective at this point in time. I don't know if that changes going forward or not, but I can see the discomfort about Jacob Elordi being cast in this for that. I absolutely can. I agree with you. He did a great job. But those are the kind of things that we have to be attuned to. If we want a multicultural, liberal, multicultural democracy in which everybody's voices are heard and honored, then we have to pay attention to stuff like that.
Yeah, and the hard part, though, Josh, is like, how do we pay attention to it? Because what happens is you'll get people who will say, oh, let's just hire the best person for the job. Okay, if the people who are in the position of power to decide who is the best are all white, then they're probably going to pick someone who is white. And so we're not picking the best people for the job. And this is an issue not just with casting, but with hiring practices. This is an issue everywhere. I think that the person who got hired to play Severus Snape might have been the exact best person for that job. But there was still this up in armsness about the fact that he has to be white. I don't know why he has to be white. He's a wizard. I think wizards can be any character. I don't think that his race is important to his character. I think that race was important to the character of Heathcliff. There are elements of like where he came from and his abandonment and his social status, his class, and his ability to rise up in class. Those were very important factors in the race of the character. They would play a massive role. So this is one where I think that they really got it wrong. And there wasn't, in my mind, nearly enough backlash about it. And that is where I think that these things are problematic and deserve to get called out, which is why I want to do it here.
I appreciate that, and I agree with it. Jeff, I made this joke to you earlier today to pivot a little bit more lighthearted. Your Academy Awards have just started giving out an Academy Award for Best Casting. Last year was the first one. I have to say, I do think that any film in which you just cast either Jacob Elordi or Margot Robbie should just be eliminated from that, because obviously if you have an opportunity to cast one of them in your movie, you're going to do it.
Sure.
So that's just, you don't get to be rewarded for that.
And the person who won cast Leonardo DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was the best casting.
You cast Leonardo DiCaprio in a movie that he executive produced. Good call.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there should be an Academy Award for casting. I have no issue with there being an award that the cast directors all get together and pick, hey, who did the best job. I certainly don't need it as an Academy Award, but I also just lost every role that I ever want to go out for if I ever wanted to be an actor. Whoops.
Sure.
All right, so this is going to pivot a little bit, Josh, from the movie, which I don't think we've talked a lot about, sort of the ins and outs of the movie, but I don't know what else to say about it. Two very hot people looked very sad and banged a lot. Like those were the plot points.
Yeah, and made people around them just miserable.
And just, yeah, absolutely miserable. But I want to talk about the nature of exploratory art.
Okay.
Because this is one of those movies and books where at first people were really torn about, was this a good book back in the 1800s? And it gained recognition as it went on, and it has evolved into this more of an uncomfortable exploration of human psychology. And I have a real issue with that idea of exploration, because film as a medium does not lend itself to exploration.
Why do you say that?
If you could do a Heathcliff and Catherine experience where I could go and enter into the castle and walk around and see whatever I wanted to see and look at them at times that I wanted to look at them, then it's an exploratory experience. But with film, you're pointing a camera at something and telling me you're going to look at this. And so it's not an exploration, it's a telling. I'm being told what to look at. And so specifically filmmakers, it's not our job to help people explore something. It's our job to tell people what we think about it. And
Sure.
Do you or don't you agree?
Okay.
And the very nature of saying you're going to look at this means you think it's interesting. Means you as a filmmaker are like, this is worth paying attention to. That's not exploration. That's being told, I think this is important. This is not an open world. This is not an open world video game where I can walk around and explore whatever I want to explore and see people see the way they eat food, see the way that they talk to each other after sex. There are specific cuts that are made where it's like, you have to pay attention to just this moment right now. And so I think specifically with film, I'm so unimpressed when filmmakers will say, I just really wanted to explore and let the audience figure it out. The audience can't figure it out because they're not seeing the whole picture. They're only seeing the picture that you're showing them. And so there's no ability to explore. And I know what they mean. It's like an exploration within yourself, and we're asking interesting questions and letting you extrapolate what you want. I just don't think you can do that in the visual medium of film because you're being told what to look at. In this movie, I wasn't given enough information to know how Emerald Farrell felt about Heathcliff and Catherine.
This is the same issue that both you and I have with the ambiguous ending.
Correct.
In movies.
Correct.
So, Jeff, if you've got this issue with artists doing or saying that a film is exploratory, where do you think that comes from? Do you think that comes from some misunderstanding of the medium, some arrogance, or even laziness around? I didn't really have all the pieces together, so I'm just going to say it's exploratory. Where do you think that comes from?
That's a great question, and I don't fully know, and I don't want to put words in Emerald's head or anybody else, but I think that it comes from not knowing yourself how you feel about it. And you haven't done the deep dive into it to really tell how you feel about it. And part of that is, like, you can see it in Wuthering Heights, where I just don't think that she showed us enough to really give us a clear, even as someone who's like, even if her goal was to say, watch this and figure it out for yourself, I don't think she showed us enough to let people figure it out for themselves. Because I don't think that she necessarily knew how she felt about this sort of chaos and relationship. But you have to ask a question of, should these people be together? Did they deserve to be together? Should they have walked away and been together? Should they have done more to try and figure out how to be together? Should they have honored their commitments and stayed apart? There was a whole side of me wanting to know, like, what it took Heathcliff to change. And if he was so singularly obsessed, and that's the reason why he made a lot of money, he still would have had to massively change along the way. And those changes would have been interesting to me. And so when artists talk about, oh, I wanted to ask the question, I think that you did want to ask the question and then you didn't answer it in yourself. And you're hoping that other people will answer it for you. But I don't think that's the point of filmmaking. I think that the point of filmmaking is to shine a light on a subject and say, this is how I feel about this, and make the case.
I think that's actually a really good point. I feel that after watching this movie, I'm going to be honest, I was bored. The movie was visually stunning. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of really good choices there, but it was boring. And that's so funny because that's actually one of my tells when I'm doing an examination of somebody and I haven't intellectually figured out that they have a personality disorder, but it's a cue for me. If I'm like kind of getting a little bored of their story, that's a key for me to say, oh, I think this is a personality disorder, because the repetitiveness of the banging their head against their own decisions ends up being a cue for me that, oh, they don't see it, and that's what I'm seeing. Okay, I can help them with the diagnosis now.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. That's really interesting. That's a heck of an admission too, Josh. I really appreciate you saying that, because I don't know that a lot of like mental health. If I'm ever in therapy and I ask my therapist, hey, are you getting bored? There's no way they're going to be honest with me if the answer is yes. You know, like they're never going to say that.
Yeah. I'm really attuned to it, and so if I find myself being bored, you find ways to snap back into it. But for me, I've figured out that is a cue that this is a personality disorder, and then I get really interested again, having that insight about myself. Okay, now I know what this is. I know why I'm having. You can't always control your reactions to things. But the important thing, and this is both for the therapist and the person in therapy, is to understand why you're having the reaction, because it's all just information.
Have you ever found someone, though, that was so incredibly boring that you were like, I'm going to convince them that they have a personality disorder so that we can have some fun?
No. 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 No.
Maybe this person's life would be more interesting with a personality disorder.
No. Jesus, Jeff. No, I do not do that. That's
You've got
bonkers.
What's called Dr. Obsessicus. You're clearly obsessed with me, and we need to talk about that. All right, Josh, I could shit on Heathcliff and Catherine all day. I do want to say, though, that I did think that Emerald Fennell crushed this in terms of the visuals, and I always enjoy her films. So I don't know that I disliked this as much as you did. I saw some value in it. If anything, the opening shot where we're hearing this squeaking, and the squeaking starts to speed up, and it's, oh, people are having sex, and then we see it's a person hanging. I was like, man, that was an incredible misdirection by a really talented director. So there were moments of this that I thought that she just absolutely crushed it. But I just think I find toxic people boring. And that's, oh, there you go. And that's not necessarily the issue. But any final thoughts before we dip into our top five? Because I'm very excited about our top five this week.
Well, look, our big mental health point was that these folks had a very toxic relationship. They had an incredibly conflictual relationship that was fueled by their individual personality disorders. That is, their ingrained concrete mental habits or ways of seeing the world are so rigid and extreme that it keeps them doing the same things over and over again. If you identify that in yourself, good, congratulations, you've got some insight, and you can get help with that in therapy.
Actually, I do want to ask you a question, Josh, because this is, I think, pretty important. Okay, so I don't think it's hard for anybody to believe and hear you that this was a toxic relationship. I have found myself in the past in a relationship that I thought was very toxic, and I needed to leave it. Borderline abusive. I had somebody key my car. burned a shirt of mine in effigy. It was a very toxic relationship. It was really hard to get out of.
Jeff, I have apologized for all these things, and we're brothers, and that's a little bit.
That's not a funny joke at all. I found it hard to get out of, Josh. What are people supposed to do if they find themselves in these sort of relationships?
The first thing that you need to do is you need to get some support, right? Whether that is from another trusted friend or if that is from a therapist. Now, if you're not allowed, quote, allowed to go and talk to somebody else, now you have to start to think about, are you being emotionally abused and do you need to get out now? And the options for getting out are really, you have to overcome the mental block of thinking that the person that you're in this toxic relationship with is the only thing that you've got going. And that's really tough. You can do a very quick web search on your phone to find local resources if you're in an abusive relationship to get out of it. That's usually not the issue. Usually the issue that keeps people in the relationships is the belief that they can't get out or that their life's going to be worse if they get out. You've got to make that decision on your own. You've got to come to that belief on your own. What I mean to say, not on your own, you have to come to that belief. No one can come to that for you, but you should absolutely get other people's eyes on the situation.
At various times in my life, I have had to counsel friends of mine through the idea that, like, this is a really toxic relationship, I know, but if I'm not with them, they're going to harm themselves. Or if I'm not with them, then, like, I failed to help them. And that's a little bit of, I think, probably what we would call gaslighting. But it's not a reason. It's not at all a good reason to stay with somebody. But it feels so real in the moment, Josh. Like, how do you... I know that the answer is just do it, get over it, find a friend who can convince you that you need to leave. But it's really hard, man. It's really hard.
You have to convince yourself to leave, right? No one can tell you to do it, or people will tell you to do it, and no one will tell you, or no one can make you do it. You have to come to that understanding and then just make the leap of faith.
All right, we covered toxicity pretty well. I'm sure we'll come back to that in future episodes, as there's a lot of toxic relationships out there. But let's have some fun. Let's get to our top 5 of the week. And you have generously provided us with the top 5 of the week. So tell us what we're talking
absolutely. About. So, Jeff, since this adaptation of Wuthering Heights has decided that Moors was just code for more abs, so the floodgates are officially open. If we're going to turn gothic yearning into high-octane thirst trap, let's just do it, okay?
Oof.
So my top 5 list is 5 other classics that are begging for a steamy 21st century glow-up.
Okay. Any honorable mentions?
I don't have any honorable mentions, so you be thinking about any ones that you would add.
Great. I love it. All right. Give me your number 5.
Okay, so Jeff, number 5 is The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. Okay, forget a quiet meditation on nature and defeat. We're talking about a shirtless, glistening Santiago wrestling a marlin that is clearly a metaphor for unresolved tension. And the key scene here is a 15-minute slow-motion sequence of Santiago applying SPF 50 while staring intensely at a seagull.
I'm into it. All right, number 5, Old Man in the Sea. What's our number 4?
All right, number 4 is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott.
Oh, no. Oh.
Think the Sisterhood of the Traveling Corsets, okay? So Marmie's out of town, and the March sisters are trading knitting for power lingerie and brooding glances at Lori. Jo doesn't just write novels. She writes spicy fanfic about the bear next door. And the key scene here is Professor Bear corrects Jo's grammar, and the friction is so intense it literally sets the manuscript on fire.
Please, for the love of God, tell me that Little Women, they're all of age. Please, for the love of God, tell me that.
Oh, of course, all of age.
Okay. All right. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
These are little women, not underage women.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Number 3.
Number 3, Jeff, is the obviously sexy The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Okay? So it is the Dust Bowl, sure, but everyone is inexplicably... everybody's... So in the Dust Bowl, everybody is inexplicably well hydrated and wearing low-rise overalls. The Jode family's trek to California isn't about survival. It's a cross-country hot girl summer in a rusted-out flatbed truck. So Tom Joad delivers his "I'll be there" speech while emerging from a pond in slow motion, dripping wet, despite the historic drought.
This is my favorite top 5 list that we've done. All right, number 3, Grapes of Wrath. Give me your number 2. I can't even wait. These were so good so far that I can't imagine which ones are better. I'm in for a treat here. Number 2.
Jeff, number 2 is Animal Farm by George Orwell.
Oh, my God.
Why use an allegory, Jeff, when you can use leather? In this reimagining, the pigs aren't just Stalinist stand-ins. They are hyper-attractive elite socialites throwing underground masked balls at the farmhouse. In the key scene, Napoleon whispers into Snowball's ear, "All animals are equal, but some are naughty."
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. This is great. This is a hot tent right here. All right, number 1. Lay it on me.
Number 1, Jeff, for the books that need a high 21st century glow up, is Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. So you thought that the alphabet was just for spelling? Think again. In this gritty, erotic thriller, a lonely linguist discovers that some words are too hot to define. So the protagonist slowly traces the definition of pulchritude, while the camera pans across a room filled with scented candles and leather-bound synonyms. Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. Looking for a good time? It's right there between lusty and luxury.
Oh, my God, I'm embarrassed. Oh, I'm embarrassed. That's fantastic. Josh, fantastic list. I don't have any obvious misses on your part. I think that Moby Dick could certainly use a glow up.
Too obvious. Too obvious, though.
I love that you had some Hemingway in there. Pride and Prejudice, you could probably say, but I think that Wuthering Heights kind of covered that one already. No, I think this is a great list. And as always, that was a list that nobody asked for, but Hollywood should have. And we're going to send some of those titles over to our friends at CAA and see if they can make some of those happen, because I would like to see some steamy glow-ups, especially of the Grapes of Wrath. Let's follow Tom Joad and his adventures.
You know what? I was just going to make that joke. I was like, I'll leave that go. I'll let that go. But you said Tom Joad instead of Tom Joad. Nice work there.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Yes, indeed. Okay, Josh, great list. Thank you. That does it for me for Wuthering Heights. Yeah, and I think you already gave some last comments, so
I did,
let's wrap it up. All right, Josh, great top 5 list. That does it for us for Wuthering Heights. Thanks, as always, for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Wuthering Heights. Cinemental is produced by me, Jeff Jones, and edited by David Haverty. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. You can find Dr. Josh Jones on Lycos or by following him on Vine. This has been a Large and in Charge production in association with PMC Media. For Dr. Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.